Am I in charge of the invitation song?
Song number 25.
Okay. I say that because I forget it when I'm in charge of it at home all the time. And I'm usually the one that gives it to myself. I know the assignment. Don't talk very long. Be lively. Use props. All right, I got it. And that's the plan for today. I can't start and move on without saying thank you to lots and lots of people. The biggest is this congregation. Thank you for blessing my family with some really wonderful memories. My girls are little, not as little, teenager, and they will be older ladies someday, if the Lord wills, and look back and remember things like that. And you have given them that. And I can't thank you enough for spiritually blessing my family so much and asking, a silly band nerd from Ohio to come down and to share these moments with you. I'm incredibly thankful for this opportunity. I can count on one hand how many gospel meetings I've held in my life because I'm not an evangelist. And anytime that someone asks me to do it, I'm just overwhelmed. Like, are you sure you don't mean Jonathan? If you call, Alan Bailey tried to, he texts me all the time trying to ask questions or set something up, and every single time he's wanting Jonathan. Every time he'll say, hey, you're speaking this Sunday, right? Over, we talked about this. I'm like, we've never talked about this. Are you sure you don't mean? Oh yeah. Wait, is this not Jonathan? No, it's not Jonathan. Which leads me into my next thing. Thank you for loving and listening to, working alongside, and living around my brother and his family, my little brother. He will forever be the little guy that rode the back seat with me and pulled pranks, and that I probably should apologize to way more as an adult for all the things that I've done to him. But to watch him be a man is it's very rewarding as an older brother to see that, and to be here with my family as well, and to experience something like this. But it's hard to see myself as a grown-up sometimes. I don't know if that still happens the older that you get, but still at 43 years old, I keep thinking, I'm responsible for this. Shouldn't somebody else that's better at this kind of thing, more of a grown-up than me? And so when I see him being an adult and having a family and he's successful, not that I didn't think that would happen, it's not that he was that kind of kid, but it has been a blessing to watch him. And again, thank you for the opportunity. Thank you for the support. Thank you for the memories. Thank you so much for the encouragement. As far as I've had so many good conversations of people coming up and discussing the sermons with me. I believe that good teaching is happening at this congregation, because one of the elements of teaching is going back and reviewing and evaluation and conversations. If I present a sermon and no one talks about it, obviously it didn't connect, or you haven't cultivated a community where we talk about these things. And that's happening here. And I've had a lot of conversations. I'm very, very thankful for that as a speaker. So, this afternoon, what are we going to talk about? Okay, let's see. I've only got 4 sermons, so we're going to have to use the 4th one today. The idea of the gospel works the best when put in the context of, okay, what am I going to do with it? It's a great sermon to listen to and to think about and study, but eventually you got to go, okay, I need to go talk to somebody about this. I need to go share it. I have a simple study for you, the wedding in Cana. And I could read it right now. There's probably a lot of you that could quote it to me. You know the details. Jesus goes to a wedding. His mom is there. They run out of wine. They run out of the fruit of the vine. And she comes to him. She says it. She pulls the mom card and she makes him turn it in. Servants do it. You could tell me all the details. I could read it. But what I want to do is this. This whole meeting, if you have caught on to this idea that I think a little bit differently, And that really works to my detriment a lot. It gets me into a lot of trouble, especially at school when I'm trying to, I'm on my 8th principal at my school. And so every time that we hire a new principal, they come in with all these new ideas. And I'm the guy in the back going, no. Well, and I need to learn to keep my mouth shut when things come to that. But I think a little bit differently. And so if I've said some things that are really off the wall, I'm sorry for that. I hope that I've said things that have made you think and maybe approach the way that you read and think in the big picture a little bit different. And I want to do that with this. I want to do that with this event. Because John says in his words, there are not enough volumes in the world to hold everything we experienced with Jesus. There's no way. And so when John decides to write something down, it's not like he's sitting there, like they're planning out the next, the plot to some cool Netflix show that's going to have 10 episodes, and we're going to get this many things in it, and I want to use this here. I don't think that's the way John wrote his book. Oh, remember that time we were there? Should we include that? No, that's not quite as explosive in it. I don't think that's the way John did it. I think John had a wealth of knowledge in events. And he used every single one of those opportunities. I think every time that John wrote something down, he has one thing in mind. I want the reader to know Jesus by reading this event. I want the experience that I had somehow to help someone to understand Jesus. Therefore, I think every single chapter, every single event, if we look through the lens of the gospel is Jesus as the saving King, and obeying the gospel is our pledge of allegiance, every single event recorded should be its own Bible study for someone. You ought to be able to take that. You ought to be able to zoom in on it with someone and really share it. I want to present the wedding in Cana as if you have someone in your life that does not know God. And I hope that you'll take this, put it in your repertoire. I've discussed with young people sometimes, they say, I want to study with a friend in college, but I don't know where to start. They're like, do you have any materials that have worked or not worked? I'm like, I can tell you a lot of materials that don't work because I've had way more failures than successes. But they say, where do you start? And a lot of times, even in growing up, I can remember Bible studies consisted of I jump here, then here, then here, then here, then here, then I go over there. Then if I'm following the red line, if you can follow, 100 feet of red line, then you'll get the point. And most people are like, oh. The average person that we meet in the world is not going to be a Bible scholar. They're not going to understand how all of these passages and all those contexts are going to make sense. And finally, there's going to be an exclamation point. They're not going to do that. But if we could learn how to simplify it, take one event that could truly help us to get all of these natures of God that eventually will help them, lead them to that pledge of allegiance, that we have simplified, we become more effective, just as 2 Peter spoke on this morning. And that's what I want to do today. I want to bring out, I think that John remembers a lot more of that wedding than he wrote down. I think there's way more of the things that happened in that wedding, but I think that he kept it concise to 12 verses because I think there's some things that he wanted us to know. And I would like you to approach this study with me today just like you would be studying with someone in your life who's an unbeliever, someone who's questioning, someone who may even have some desire but just doesn't know God. I want you to approach this study just like we're doing, and I want you to think of somebody in mind that maybe you could use this study with. Maybe that you could help them. I think that John makes 6 statements that we read right over and we miss the importance of the nature of God that he's trying to capture. It says that Jesus was invited also. You're like, so? I mean, that kind of sets up, isn't that like part of the setting and the characters? Jesus was invited also. You know why this is important? Because Jesus, it says that he has experienced all of our weaknesses as a human being. And I think that anyone that we ever talk to needs to know that God knows what they're going through. God knows the loneliness. God knows the sadness. God knows being overwhelmed. He knows the stresses and the pressures. He's not just some deity that's floating up there. God came to earth. God knows what we go through. And if anybody has ever been a part of a wedding, you know that it's the most explosive amount of emotions all in one place at one time. You know, they say it's the happiest day on earth for, I don't know who it is, somebody, it's the happiest day, but everybody else, it's crazy stressful. There's so many overwhelming emotions. You get all of these people into one building, and everyone is feeling something different. You have some that are sad that they're losing a member of their family that's moving on or maybe moving away. You have others that are happy that that person is moving on and moving away. You have all mixture in between. But in the midst of that, you also have people that are looking longingly and lonely at this event, and it's not as exciting for them. It may bring out a really difficult and sad part. And every time that everyone celebrates something so great, it's just a reminder that that's not something that is going on in their life. You think that Jesus experienced that? You think that he watched as friends around him got married and settled down and had someone to confide in and just enjoyed the comfort of life and thought to himself, I'm just going to be alone the rest of my life? I think that is, if it says that he knows our weaknesses, he knows that feeling. And he was experiencing that at a wedding just like anyone else. And so when John captured that Jesus was invited also, he's trying to remind you that Jesus was human. Jesus experienced your pain. Jesus experienced your stress just like he did the things of everyone that you may be talking to. The next thing that happens, we know that they run out of the fruit of the vine. They run out of the wine. Now, I'm not getting specifically into, it's called wine over and over here, but if you've studied it long, you know that it's a reference to it being fruit, which would mean that it's not fermented. That's not what the sermon is about, to really focus in on that. So we'll keep calling it wine, and I'm going to assume that you know exactly what I'm talking about, the unfermented fruit of the vine at this time. They run out of the grape juice, the wine, and everything gets a little interesting at that point. Now, one element that people don't really focus on is it's only like 2 verses later that Jesus fixes everything. But 2 verses was probably a couple of hours. It was probably a fairly extensive amount of time. Can you imagine if we sat down back here and we had a great spread? What about you guys know how to do Mexican food in Texas? Okay. Love it. Can you imagine if we got back there and everybody got their plates full of food and everything was just great? We got all these spicy Mexican flavors, and you're tasting it as you're going through, and you're like, man, I can't wait for some ice cold water. And we get out there and we open up all the coolers and we're out of drinks. All you good, patient Christian people, I know none of you would complain. You would all be like, it's okay, the Lord giveth and the Lord taketh away, right? But eventually, we would start to grumble. By like the 3rd taco that we're struggling to get down, you're like, man, who was in charge of this? Jonathan dropped the ball again. Who was in charge of drinks? And there's this little undercurrent. Okay, well, how are we to say that the first century people are just so much more righteous than us, that they weren't experiencing that? They were having a good time and everybody's eating and, they're dancing, so they're thirsty, and they sit down and all of a sudden, there's nothing else to drink. And Jesus doesn't just snap his fingers and their cups are refilled. There was going to be a period of time where no one had anything to drink. So there is obviously some type of undercurrent. Now, it doesn't discuss that, but you know what? We know human nature, and I know me, and you know you. And if you don't get what you need to make life comfortable, well, there's going to be some grumbling. So that's the scenario that we have ourselves in. And the pressure, who do you think the pressure's on? It's on the master of the feast, of course, but it's also on these servants. They're feeling it because they're feeling helpless. I can't do anything about it. All of these people that I'm seeing are getting so upset, I'm completely stuck. I'm just a nobody servant who, I can't make any more of this fruit of the vine. So Mary goes to Jesus. And I love the interaction because she says, basically, son, you see this situation, and it's obvious. He knows what's going on. You need to do something about it. He says, woman, it's not my time. And just like a mother, she doesn't wait and argue. She just turns and says, just do whatever he says. He's like, okay, I guess. But I love the phrase. She turns to these servants and she says, do whatever he asks of you. Why is that important? The important element when studying with somebody who does not know the Lord is we cannot move forward in knowing who he is until we stop and recognize that we cannot get out of this place ourselves. I'm stuck in a position and I'm lost in that position. I cannot move forward on my own. I can't climb out on my own. I am completely stuck. And that's exactly where these servants are. They weren't getting out on their own. They were stuck. They didn't know how they were going to fix this. And so only in the moment when they realize that they have nothing else to do, when I am completely lost, can I say and answer the call to do whatever he asks. The problem with most of us is we don't get that low. We don't recognize and we don't remember what it felt like to be that lost. And so we're not willing completely to say to Jesus, yes, I'll do whatever you ask, because we don't feel that burden of being completely lost. And when trying to help someone understand what God expects of them, it has to start with, you can't fix this on your own. This lost and guilty feeling, this overwhelming lost feeling, you can't get out of this on your own. It starts with Jesus. And the way to do that is we do whatever he tells you. This is a common theme throughout the New Testament. Jesus talks about it himself when he says in chapter 14, verse 15, if you love me, keep my commandments. There's a common theme in the New Testament. When he's giving a larger thought here in Matthew chapter 7, verse 21, he says, he who does the will of my Father shall enter the kingdom of heaven. He is getting to that same thing. If you want to be my follower, you've got to do whatever I ask of you, not some of the things. You've got to be willing and desperate to do whatever I'm asking. In Ecclesiastes 12, verse 13, the wisest man ever sums it all, he sums it all up when he says, the end of the matter, all has been heard. Fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. It can all be summed down to that statement. Do whatever he tells you. The next thing is, a few verses down, it mentions that there were 6 stone jars holding 20 to 30 gallons each. Now, I love the skeptic that might read that and go, 20 to 30 gallons? 10 gallons is a huge discrepancy. Why would John not know the difference between 20 gallons and 30 gallons? If he was really inspired by the Spirit, the Holy Spirit, God working through the Holy Spirit, wouldn't he be able to say it was 23.796 gallons? Wouldn't he be able to be exact? Well, the idea is that John is not some zombie, just writing down. He's like, I'm in the Spirit. I'm just writing down everything that being used as a puppet. I think this is a beautiful example of the Spirit allowing John's humanity to come through. This is him saying, I remember this. I was a man. I was there. I saw. I experienced this. And I'm using my memory. It's not being forced upon me. It's not being plugged into my head. I'm recalling this as a man. So it was, I don't know, it was pretty big. It was roughly 20 to 30 gallons. Now here's where I have my prop. And I'm not going to turn it around, turn it upside down, and play drums on it like I was doing before services. I want to keep things scriptural here. This is a 5-gallon bucket. When you go to Lowe's or you go to Home Depot and you got to paint the garage, you got to paint a bedroom or whatever, you might get a 5-gallon bucket. I can't stand these things. Now, I like to use them and whatnot, but when it's full, it's awful. It's super heavy and awkward. And there's this tiny little handle up here, so I'm like, the look, the guy that's walking or the lady that's walking through, and you got to use your knee and your leg to like kick it up onto your cart because it's extremely heavy. And not only that, it feels like it's just slicing through your fingers. So this is a huge amount, 5 gallons. Can you imagine if I filled this up with grape juice and I said, we're going to use this for communion today? That would be, there'd be like 2,000 of us. This is 5 gallons. It says those jars were 20 to 30 gallons. Imagine 6 of these. That is a huge jar. Now, consider the fact that this is plastic. They didn't have that back then. It's some type of clay. The jar on its own would have been massive and incredibly heavy. You're not just walking over and picking up one of these empty jars by yourself. This is a group squat. Use your knees, lift, don't use your back kind of thing. And that's empty. Imagine you fill 30 gallons with water. This is a massive thing. Oh yeah, and there's 6 of them. What kind of wedding was this? When you watch The Chosen, there's like the 30 of them going la-di-da, and they're dancing in circles. And I'm like, those people are not drinking 30 gallons of wine. Okay, so, there's my prop. But to put that in perspective, I want you to think about that is what is being asked of these servants. And we're going to get back to that in just a second, but I want to know why John says specifically there were 6 jars, stone jars, that were used for Jewish purification rites. Why does he randomly out of nowhere get really specific with his details? Because I think Jesus was specific in why he picked them. Jesus could have snapped his fingers, as we said, and everybody's cup just go blah, 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 and just keep refilling. And then every time they drink, they go, you believe this? You know, I mean, he's going to have baskets that just keep refilling. I mean, what was that like? As they keep taking it out, and they're like, no matter what I do, I can't get rid of this fish and this bread. So he could have snapped his fingers. He could have snapped his fingers and them already been full of water. Why did he make them go fill? There's a lot of things he could have done, but he was very specific in saying this, in using this, and John wanted to make sure of all the volumes in the world, he wanted to make sure he was very specific on this detail. This is why. Because Matthew chapter 5 captures Jesus saying that he came not to destroy or get rid of the law, he came to fulfill the law. He came to take what these Jews already knew about God, all of their commands, and he wanted to make sure that he fulfilled it, that he finished it, that he made it, he improved it even better. When we look at Hebrews chapter 8, verse 13, by speaking of the new covenant, he has made the first one obsolete. And what is obsolete is aging, will soon disappear. There came a time when the Old Testament ended, the New Testament, the new covenant, the heart that was written on our hearts began. And it's not an accident that Jesus took jars that were made for Jewish washing purification rites that had a very specific purpose in Jewish tradition. And he used those, and whatever old liquid and old use they had, all of a sudden it became new and it became better, so much better. He is trying to symbolize the old law going away and finishing and being fulfilled, but yet taking what you already knew, the same vessels, and putting something new, something better, something fulfilled in it. He is teaching them a lesson within a lesson that's happening here. The next phrase, it says that they filled them to the brim. Now, I go back to my prop. Jesus says to me, David, I want you to take this 5-gallon bucket. I want you to go down the street and I want you to fill it up with water because I'm going to do something special with it. The very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to go, do I have to fill it all the way to the top? And if I do, it's probably not going to make it all the way back. Can I do like half of it? Are you sure? I want you to think about that. Did they pick these jars up and walk them down? I don't think they did. I think they carried buckets and went to a well of some type and brought it back. We're talking about 180 gallons of water. 1 or 2 guys did not walk down with a bucket down to the end of the road. There are obviously several of them doing several trips with large enough buckets to fill those all the way to the top. And so when I'm thinking of what Jesus asked me to do, it's a little overwhelming. And so I may think in my head some excuses like, Jesus, you think we could do like 1 jar first? Can we do 1 and make sure that it's enough? And whatever it is that you're planning on doing, can we try that? Or can we come back with 1 of the buckets and whatever? Do we really have to fill it? And do we have to do all 6 first? But I want to go back to the first point. Here are people that are in a lost state that realize they can't get out of it on their own. I cannot fix this on my own. And so therefore, I am willing to give you my heart completely. Whatever it is that you're asking of me, I am willing to do it. And that's why John records that they filled them to the brim. When you follow Jesus, you do everything with everything in you. When Jesus asks, we don't question, we don't challenge, we don't see if there's a way that maybe we could do this a little bit better. I think this is a wonderful symbol here of how we obey Jesus. Fill it to the brim. In Mark chapter 8, verse 34, whoever wants to be my disciple must deny himself, take up his cross, and follow me. These servants have already denied themselves. They've already set themselves aside on what they wanted to do and what they didn't want to do, and were willing to do whatever Jesus had asked of them. When they go ahead and they fill the jars with water, I don't know if it just started changing color immediately. I don't know exactly how it happened. It doesn't record anything like that. But when they are asked to take a cup and a scoop and take it to the master, can you imagine as he's getting ready to drink it and they're thinking, oh no, he's going to drink water and I'm going to get fired on the spot. Oh, this is going to be so bad. Oh, and that water has been out for a long time. I'm just going to start backing up slowly. And all of a sudden he drinks it, and then the master, wow, that's amazing. And can you think maybe for just a little second that the servant felt like, remember that book, The Emperor's New Clothes, where he walked around naked because everybody kept saying that what he was putting on imaginary clothes and he was the only one that could see it, or the crowd was the only one who could see it. You think that maybe the servant felt like that a little bit, like, is this a really bad joke? Is he like pretending like this is? Because I know what it is. I went and got it out. Eventually they would have had to have tasted it or had to have seen it and gone, hold on a second. I carried water up, and now it's wine. Who is this guy? So this phrase, here's the next one. As the master brings the bridegroom in and he's tasted it, he says, everyone serves the good wine first, but you kept the good wine until now. Everyone. I like the dramatic irony. Remember my Superman story from Friday night? And I talked about, I love the fact that when the audience knows something, but the characters in the story, they don't really know it at the time. I love that we all know who he's talking about. You know what he says when he's saying everyone serves? He says everyone's nature is to care about themselves. Everyone's nature is to think what is best for me. And so when he says that, he's saying everyone would make this choice. They're going to put their best foot forward. They're going to put the best selfie on Facebook. They're going to really put themselves out there as being just the best version of themselves, because that's the image that they want to present. That's just human nature. That is everyone. So when he says everyone serves the good wine first, he's talking about you. He's talking about me. He's talking about everyone there. He says, I don't understand. But you kept the best. It goes against human nature. I don't understand. And that's because what he doesn't understand is because he's describing the nature of God. It is God who is selfless. He is the one on the other side who has done this wonderful miracle. When the servants did exactly what they were asked to do, I take that personally, and I put myself into it, and I think about how much I would talk back to it. Back home, on the side, I have a construction company that builds a couple of houses a year, and I try to squeeze it in the summers. This summer, Gabe came, and he worked with me for all of June. And Gabe got there, and just like any young pup that shows up to a construction site, he has to assimilate himself to the boss's rules. Unfortunately, the mean old Uncle David and all his rules, yeah, they took a few days to connect to. And I would say, Gabe, you see that big pile of plywood over there? You see those like 100 sheets? Yeah, those are great. The problem is we need them over here. So get busy moving that stack over here. Can you move that stack to here? And every day for about 3 days, and he finally caught on after about 3 days, he would always say, I'll try. And what was the response? I'm going to put Gabe on the spot in front of everybody. I would say, Gabe, can you try to do that? And he would say, I'll try. And then what would I say back to you?
Don't try it, do it.
That's right. I would say, pretty much, I would quote Yoda and I'd be like, do or do not. There is no try. We don't try in construction. We just do it. Because when you say, I'll try, what you're implying is, I'm going to put my best effort, but I'm also going to hold on to this big possibility that I can't do it. Because then it becomes about me and my abilities. But when I go at something like, I'm going to do this, you asked me to do it, I'm going to do it because it's about you. And I'll do whatever I can to make this happen. There's no longer that trap door, that opportunity for failure. And I appreciate that. And after like the 4th day, he'd be like, I'd say, hey, you see that big long stack of 20-foot 2x6s? We're going to need those in the back. He's like, hey, I'll try. Oh, okay, I'll do this. I'm like, yes, I love that things are sinking in. After everyone has had their fill, after everyone has seen this wonderful thing, John records one last statement. If you're studying with someone, I pray that this is the last statement in your study with them. I hope that you can help them to see that once they understand that God understands what they're going through. God was a man. He understands their feelings, their pressures, their stresses. He knows that. That when we are lost and they are lost, and that they should do anything that God asks of them, that God is very specific in the things that He asks, and that we should do them completely in every way, all the way to the brim, and that His nature is different than ours. The last thing that John records, and his disciples believed in Him. When presented with the true nature of God, all we can really do is stand in awe and believe in Him. And I pray that if you take this study and you have an opportunity, or any other passage, and you look at it like its own opportunity in itself, its own authentic chance to share the gospel with just that event, I pray that it ends with them becoming a disciple of Jesus Christ and them believing. I'm finished with this sermon and the meeting, and I have thoroughly enjoyed it. I was so nervous driving down here. I was listening to my notes on a podcast, a previous version, and I just kept thinking, there's no way I'm going to be able to do what I had done in the past. And the pressure was on. I knew you had a wonderful congregation, but the support, the warmth, the passion that you have been so calming. And I thank you for that. It has been a wonderful 4 services. And when I said at the beginning, I'll say it again, I'm so thankful for my family to be able to be here with me, to experience this, and to take it with them forever. I pray that things that we have discussed the last 4 days maybe have shedded some light, maybe some insight on the way that you look at Scripture. And I look forward to a day when the Lord wills I can come back and meet some new faces from the evangelism that happens with you in your life and your work here. We never want to close without offering the invitation. If there's someone here that would like to obey the gospel by pledging their allegiance and being baptized, we want to extend that to you now at this time. If there's someone who is overwhelmed by burden and would like to ask for the prayers of the congregation, we want to extend that invitation now to you and would ask you to come forward as we stand.